Chris, welcome to the B Flow Show podcast. I appreciate you doing it, and I just enjoyed catching up with you there, and I know we're looking over some Fantastic Four stuff. Kind of
Yeah.
tell us about the significance of this. What's going on with this?
Um, I wanted to make this joke for a long time, never could, but I am a first-time caller, long-time listener, and I especially love your deep thought stuff. And it kind of jumped out at me, like maybe something like this matches kind of what you're doing and your sense of humor and what you like. So there are a lot of deep thoughts here buried in the what I kind of think is one of the most unlikely places is comic books. And I am not a expert in comics. I do enjoy reading them. It's kind of weird. Like I know and have read more comics than anybody I've met, and then I go online and I read on Reddit or other people's opinions about comics, and they have read 1,000 times more than me. So I'm in this weird spot where I know some and I enjoy it, and I don't have a lot of people to talk about these really cool ideas with. And then every time I find somebody that's read comics, they've read like a couple that I have. And over the last, I don't know, 10 years or so reading them, I also listened to podcasts about comics. And everybody kept on talking about this Jonathan Hickman run of Fantastic Four. I listened to a podcast, and they get on Fantastic Four, and they say, the best Fantastic Four comic is Jonathan Hickman. Jonathan Hickman. Jonathan Hickman. And I thought, well, I guess it's time to read Jonathan Hickman's run, even though I don't really care about the Fantastic Four. Their movies are not good, and their powers in general are not extraordinarily interesting, but they are the first Marvel story. That's what Jack Kirby and the great Stan Lee, when they were trying to save their comic book line, their company, they decided to write a story about Fantastic Four. And they actually have different stories about that. Jack Kirby's story sees him more as the hero, and Stan Lee, his story seems toward him being the hero on which one really saved the industry. I want to say that because Jack Kirby is kind of the lesser known genius behind the stories, and Stan Lee gets all the credit because he's so charismatic, which everybody loves Stan Lee, and I love him too. But Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, who created most of what Spider-Man is, those two guys don't get enough credit. And so them being kind of the originals, I'd never really connected with their stories, and I kept on hearing, man, this Jonathan Hickman guy has the greatest run of Fantastic Four, and I would say it is my favorite run I've ever read. It is an extraordinarily good story. But let me ask you, like, how many comics have you read or have you heard about this Jonathan Hickman story?
Well, for comics, for me, growing up, they were a really big part of my life. I still enjoy, comics in general, the stories, the art. I appreciate it. But growing up, huge, Wizard, I used to subscribe to Wizard magazine, which was the guide to comics. And I even had like a letter published in there when I was like 10 or 11. You can write the editor or whatever. It was big for me to get that magazine because I could keep up with all the storylines in the comics instead of subscribing to Spider-Man or X-Men or whatever. It would actually kind of summarize what was going on in the world of comics, as well as give you a price guide for like how much your comics were worth. So huge fan there. I think it may still be online, Wizard, but I don't know. I haven't really checked into it in a while. But some of my favorites as a kid, The Mask, oddly enough, and wildly different than the Jim Carrey movies. It was a graphic novel that was really violent. and really dark. So a lot of these graphic novels that were adapted for kids, they were just not for kids at all. So as a kid, I really enjoyed The Mask, and there was a series called The Mask Returns, and The Mask Strikes Back, kind of telling the origin of that. Also, The Crow by James O'Barr, very poetic, very dark. I don't know. I guess I was a troubled kid, but all these dark stories I gravitated toward. Very poetic, you know. And The Crow ended up being a '90s movie with Brandon Lee. Didn't do the graphic novel justice as far as, you know, the level of poetry and kind of storytelling that's in it. Those were a couple of my favorites, and then of course, just like the random kid, I really enjoyed, you know, just the Spider-Man comics. There was Amalgamation comics that came out that were kind of a mix of DC and Marvel. They kind of did that to try to save their company at one point. And it's amazing, just like watching, I guess, video games. As we were growing up, I was born in '85. So, like, watching video games progress into what they are now. Comics, kind of the same thing, you know. Stan Lee went out a hero on top, you know. At first, he was, you know, struggling, you know. He struggled a long time to get his stories out there, and now they're just, like, everywhere on the big screen. Everybody loves them. Robert Downey Jr. has you got a lot to think about him for rebooting Iron Man or having Iron Man come out. And yeah, you know, Stan Lee, like you said, he shouldn't get all the credit, and you're 100% correct about that. And but he was a spokesman, so he's kind of like Ray Kroc for McDonald's, you know. The McDonald's brothers created everything, but Ray Kroc went around and spread McDonald's name, and, you know, he was the businessman of it all and the face of it. And without that, you know, it wouldn't be what it is now. But yeah, just going back.
Kind of like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak too. Like, Steve Jobs was the face and the entrepreneur, which is a huge part of it, but he never invented anything, and that was all Steve Wozniak. Like, it's a duo or a trio in this case for Marvel, and not to take anything away from the entrepreneur, but his ideas weren't always the best. Yeah,
absolutely. And you know, Steve Jobs, you know, he spoke to the thing. He didn't actually, like, maybe create it, but he spoke it, you know, made it what it is, and, you know, gave it life, I guess you'd say. So yeah, it's Stan Lee had a rough time. You know, Marvel had a rough time, and I remember in the '90s, you know, it wasn't cool. You know, you were a geek, you were a nerd if you liked comics, and, you know, that's really what's kind of even pissing me off now. Is, you know, these kids, you know, they're cool because they like Iron Man and they like these stories that's like the movies, because millions of dollars have been put into production of these epic things that we read on paper, you know. Like, all these stories aren't new and original to me that are coming out on the screen. So it's not that I'm not a fan of the movies, it's just I had this idea as a kid what these stories were, you know, and then I'm watching them on a big screen. So, not saying they're terrible, they're bad, you know, I'm not that kind of, you know, geek, but, you know, I am saying that they're different. I'm actually watching X-Men, the animated series, right now. And, you know, just the level of storytelling and the character development on the animated TV show, to me, is better than what they've been putting in to these high-quality productions. But
absolutely,
you know, with the exception of Iron Man, I think Robert Downey Jr. was born to play Tony Stark, and brilliant, you know. So,
and Jon Favreau fought for him to get that part because Marvel didn't want to use him.
But we're
actually, if I can interrupt interrupt. We were actually headed into one of my pet peeves about podcasts and comic books.
Yeah.
Is that whenever people bring up comic books on podcasts, they immediately go to the movies. Which, if you want to do that, that's cool. But there are so many amazing comic book stories that are really exploding with story that we can jump into. So, when you think of Fantastic Four, like Batman he is the crusader, and Superman is altruistic and all helpful. Spider-Man is responsibility. Can you guess what a good Fantastic Four story, its theme or motive is?
I would say probably what fits the X-Men, kind of like being different and being okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They all kind of went through this transformation process that they may or may not wanted. So they they came into these powers through gamma rays, I think it was. So they came into these powers, the Thing turned into Brock, so he had to deal with, I think he may have been married or at least had a girlfriend, so it's relational issues there. Reed Richards can stretch everything, all of his body parts, so I guess he doesn't have a problem with anything. He's definitely not insecure in most areas. Invisible Woman. I don't know. There's a lot of themes that can be had, but mainly overcoming your differences or relationships as it pertains to their powers. But what's your take, man? You got the Fantastic Four.
I think you're right on. I think at the end there, for relationships, I think family is their kind of core. Like a good Fantastic Four story, even though they bicker and fight, and the marriage is always kind of tough because of their situations and his work ethic. Like, it all comes back to a family story. And they're Marvel's first family. They are brother and sister Sue Storm, married Reed Richards to be husband and wife. And Ben Grimm is more than a friend, almost a brother to him. Mm-hmm. And kind of they all revolve around that. And their family has expanded over the years a little bit. And I'm going to throw a couple names out there that people probably don't know. And I hope that as I'm saying these, I don't mess them up in the future because it can get a little confusing. So it's Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, who can not only stretch really far, but he is probably the greatest scientist on Earth, up there with Hank Pym, Black Panther, and Bruce Banner. So he is stretchy, but he is also a super genius. And then his wife, Sue Storm, Invisible Woman, has the power of force fields and invisibility. Johnny Storm flies through the air as a ball of fire and as the Human Torch. And Ben Grimm is almost as strong as the Hulk and Thor, but not quite. And then Marvel has added Reed's father, and his name is Nathaniel, and he's kind of a time traveler. And then Reed and Sue Storm had children, and they have a girl who, at the beginning of this story, is about 3 years old, named Valeria. And by the age of 3, she is probably smarter than her dad. So that's Valeria. And then Franklin Richards, which, as a child, he is probably the strongest being in the Marvel universe. He hasn't fully realized his powers, but he is what's called an Omega level hero, meaning that they could probably cause the end of the universe if they decided. That's how incredibly powerful he is. And for Marvel reasons, I don't really know, his powers have been kind of shut off over the years, and gets to get shut off again. And this story of Jonathan Hickman is exploring the relationships between Nathaniel, who is the grandfather of the kids and the father of Reed Richards, and also Franklin and Valeria. And this story begins, and then I've also provided you, and if you want to post this somehow online, I'm sure you could find a way, kind of visuals to go along with, because the images are quite amazing. But the story starts of Jonathan Hickman, where Reed is trying to answer one question. He's come up with 100 questions, and then his 101st problem is he wants to solve everything. He wants to solve the problem of everything. And to do that, he's created a bridge he's created a machine that can answer the question, and the machine has created a bridge in between universes. There's this little pocket universe that he discovers. And as he goes in, he is greeted by another Reed Richards who can light on fire like the Human Torch, and another Reed Richards who is invisible like Sue Storm. And he finds not only those who have come to greet him in similar ways that he would understand, but he finds a whole council of Reed who have different powers. Some Doctor Strange, some look like things. Just every other sort of Reed Richards. And even one who's dressed in green, he says, "What's your power?" And he says, "Oh, I don't have any powers. I'm just Reed Richards." So every sort of Reed Richards have all asked their own question in their own universe, how to solve everything. And the machine opened up a portal to a parallel universe where they all met each other. And these Reeds are all working together to try to find the solution to everything. And the crazy part is the three that founded the council, all three have infinity gauntlets with all the stones attached. So, however, in their own universe, they have become the strongest beings in their universe. And so the Council of Reeds are trying to answer the question, how to solve everything. And they show Reed 3 different worlds that they've discovered. And the first one they take him to, all of them are kind of presenting, each Reed with an infinity gauntlet is presenting a different planet. And the first one they go to, they show a planet or a series of planets that all it does is grow food. And they're showing the Reeds, the Council of Reeds, at their most altruistic. They're trying to solve the problem of hunger in the entire multiverse. And then they show them at their worst. And they show them underneath the council. They show a Doom, a Dr. Doom, and they put a bracelet, or they put a necklace around him and lobotomize Doom. And they put him in a room with countless other Dooms. And they have lobotomized every single Doom from every single multiverse, or every universe in the multiverse, except for the ones that are, a couple of them are still out there, including R. Reed Richards. And then they show them at their most powerful, and they allow the new Reed to stand above a star and pull out dark matter of a star and prevent it from going supernova prematurely, and in doing so saved 8 billion lives. So it's important to show each Reed that comes in what they're at their best, what they're at their worst, and what they are at their most powerful. And so for you or anybody else, you might recognize that Rick and Morty had a council of Ricks, and that's kind of like a nod to the story.
I'm glad you said that, because I was literally thinking that the whole time. I didn't want to interrupt, but I was thinking, that sounds like, yeah, Rick and Morty. Awesome. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, man.
No, that's cool. Well, please do. Anything to add from that so far? What do you think?
No, that's great. I went over the slideshow, and I'm like, I didn't fully understand, and yeah, I'll put this up. So I was literally flipping through as you were, describing, and I didn't know what the hell was going on, but now, as you were talking, I'm like, whoa, so I'm understanding the story that's unfolding here on this. So yeah, man, it's really cool.
And Jonathan Hickman is also the type of writer that he's probably going to lose you. And in the end, when things finally come together, you're like, oh, that's where he was going. That's amazing. Him and Grant Morrison are kind of famous for doing that, about all these multiverses and mind-bending physics. And then in the end, you're like, oh, this story was about this all along. As a lot of great storytellers do.
The nutritional value of carrots.
Yeah. All right, so the Council of Reeds is then all of a sudden attacked by these beings called the Mad Celestials. And Hickman doesn't go into too deeply on what they are exactly, but being celestials are the strongest forces in the galaxy, in the universe. These have grown mad and decided that that the Council of Reeds is too powerful, and they begin to attack and terrorize the group. And they begin to transport themselves to the three that have the Infinity Gauntlet. An Infinity Gauntlet can only work in its own universe. So they're jumping through the multiverse to get to their particular universe where they can use the Infinity Gauntlet to begin snapping them away. They begin using their ultimate nullifiers to try and fight them off. And all of that is kind of pulling from deep Marvel lore that some of that I didn't know, that I had to go and do a little bit of research on. But the Mad Celestials are kind of the biggest villains in this story arc. So they fight them off, and the Celestials begin to retreat, and the Reeds begin having the conversation again about what it means to be a part of the council. And something they communicate to Reed is that every single Reed there has chosen that the most important thing is to solve everything, and it's going to monopolize all of your time. And every Sue starts out patient, but she grows tired of losing her husband to the problem of everything. And their family begins, the Fantastic Four or whatever community Reed has been in, is not as important as trying to solve the problem of everything. So the story jumps to Nathaniel Richards, and as a time traveler jumping through time, Nathaniel tells Reed that he has to leave for a long time. And then from Reed's perspective, it's years, but for Nathaniel's perspective, it's only a couple of days. But Nathaniel finds Reed again in college, where his best friend Ben Grimm and this super genius friend, Victor Von Doom, are there. And Nathaniel says that he has now gained this power of jumping through time, jumping from one era to another. And he says this to Reed, that he landed 600,000 in the future, 600,000 years in the future. And he gives this little story. He says, in this time, the Earth is supervised by a being called Immortus, empowered by Time Variant's authority and enforcement arm of the auditors. It is his role to police all of space-time and to handle any operations or events that could potentially risk the sanctity of time. The collapse into a single time stream of all individuals, a parallel of themselves, each of them with the power to navigate through time, is precisely this kind of threat. And as such, he ordered all to be destroyed. So every Nathaniel has appeared at this one time 600,000 years in the future and met this being called Immortus. And he's about to destroy them all. And he said, as we prepared to fight for our lives, the cruel and cunning nature of Immortus became apparent. He offered us a deal. He called it a compromise, which he would allow one of us to live, but we must choose amongst ourselves who to be. And thus began the systematic murder-suicide of every single one of me that has ever existed. He called it the Great Hunt. So Nathaniel traveled 600,000 years in the future, and there with him was every other Nathaniel from the multiverse. And this being called Immortus demanded that they all fight and kill one another until there was one left. And so they all do fight, and our Nathaniel from our Reed chooses not to fight, chooses to run away. And this psychotic dictator like Nathaniel kills all of the rest. And so in order for the hunt to end, they have to kill this evil one. So Nathaniel recruits a young Reed Richards, a young Ben, and a young Victor Von Doom to kill the last one. So they all go to the future and fight, and Victor Von Doom ends up with the killing blow because the other heroes don't want to, I guess, bloody their own hands and take the life of him. What do you think?
Yeah, wow. A lot of intricate points there. The slide that you showed me with the big head also reminds me of Rick and Morty. When those heads come to the planet, and they're like, "Show me what you got," like that. That kind of looks like that guy. But okay, so Reed Richard has a son, all powerful. They're trying to fight each other to gain basically the ultimate person. So it's kind of like a reality show to be the only Steven Richards.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So this is Reed's dad, Nathaniel, and yeah, he's yeah. There's only going to be one left, and lucky for us, it's the one that actually has good conscience and not the evil one.
Yeah. So
do you know much about what's that?
He is the kind of our universe Steven Richards. Is that correct?
Yes.
Like the one that's actually fighting the dictator to be the ultimate.
Yeah, you got it. And so this is another one of those, like, okay, I'm just going to trust that this is going to be a good story. Like, we're going into the future and actually Immortus, I was looking it up. This is the first time I've ever heard him, but he's a long-standing time-traveling villain in Marvel. But it's him pulling from kind of deep lore of Marvel, and you're just kind of like, okay, I guess we're going somewhere with this.
Yeah.
What do you know about Galactus?
Oh, Galactus, Eater of Worlds. So he's the one that goes around and basically, I don't know if he actually eats the planets or he feeds off the energy. I think he feeds off the energy of the planets and becomes more powerful, like with each one. The Silver Surfer was the one that fought him a lot, or I think he began as his servant, but then he rebelled against him. If I'm not mistaken, like he was like the messenger that came before Galactus showed up. But then he was like,
so
yeah.
Yeah, you're all correct there. So Galactus is another celestial who has decided, or the way he feeds is to feed on the energy of planets. And instead of expending all of his energy searching for planets and the right one, he creates heralds to go out and do his to surf, the cosmos to find the next planet. And the deal originally was that I think his name was like Norin Rad had one planet, and he pleaded with Galactus, who was about to consume. He's like, well, why don't you make me your messenger or make me your herald, and I'll help you as long as you spare our planet. And then he began to lead him to all these planets that didn't have intelligent life, until Galactus was running out of planets, and he had to pick one that had intelligent life, and he picked Earth. And so Silver Surfer and Galactus were coming to consume Earth, and which is, I think, the second movie, which is not a great movie, but it's like one of the first iconic Fantastic Four stories by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. So it's like a 2.5 issue one, which is incredibly long for a 70s story, and kind of changed a lot of how Marvel Comics were told and how big and cosmic you can make it. So in this story in particular, Galactus there's two of them, but they're really the same one. There's a living Galactus, and there's also a dead Galactus from the future that was buried in the Earth at the same time, which is kind of confusing. So there's a living one who lived for thousands more years and apparently died and came back, and they brought the body back and buried it in the Earth. And there's a scene where the Galactus is speaking to Reed Richards, and he tells him how afraid he is of Franklin Richards, his son. So as big and powerful and amazing as Galactus is, there's somebody that he fears, and that's Reed Richards' son, Franklin Richards. And there's another instance that's also important in the story I'll just drop, that there is an adult Franklin Richards who comes back to visit and hang out with his childhood self, and he's teaching him how to create baby universes. So Franklin will just sit in his closet and create a baby universe, and him and his best friend will dive into that universe and use it as a playground and play superhero. So they're going on with the story. Valeria, as an adult too, they all call Val. When she's an adult, she decides to visit her mom and kind of share something that's going to happen in the future. And she says the coming days are going to be dark and full of loss, and it will feel like everything's going to break apart, that it will shatter and everything will end. And only you can hold us together. Can you be strong, Mother? Stronger than you've ever been before. There will be a moment where you want to give up. You're going to want to let go. You want to reach that point. You look up into the sky and look up and remember the price that was paid. And so young Valeria also, being one of the smartest people in the universe, in the world, Reed starts another school or a class for her and a couple other students called the Future Foundation. And Future Foundation is a collection of the most brilliant children in the world, and they're trying to solve problems as well. And so at this time, as Hickman's writing Fantastic Four, he's also writing some tie-ins of another comic called the Future Foundation. And so Reed has started his own school. And so they make a list of all the things they want to solve, and the first thing they want to do is they want to make Ben Grimm into a human again. And so they come up with this potion or elixir, and he drinks it, and for about a week, he gets to be a human again. So he visits his girlfriend, and he does a couple other things. And I would love for you to see this picture as well, where it says they're getting early dinner with old friends. So they're doing a couple things. They're going to baseball games. They're going out and hanging out with the Avengers. And then 4 people are sitting at the table. Do you see that? It's Ben Grimm. If you can see, it's Ben Grimm and Johnny Storm. And can you see the other 2 guys?
Yeah, it's Stan Lee. Is that Jack Kirby?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I completely missed that little nugget in there. And then I read some more about the story later and came back to that picture. Not gonna lie, I got a little teary-eyed. They went to have dinner with old friends. They're seeing their creators.
Couple of true believers.
Yeah. All right. So as he's finishing his time being human, there is one of the Fantastic Four's oldest villains, a nihilist, who lives in a parallel universe called the Negative Zone, is trying to enter into their home, the Baxter Building. And so Ben Grimm as a human, Johnny Storm, and a couple of the Future Foundation kids are trying to stop it. And the only way they can figure out to do is they go into the Negative Zone and they have to lock the door from that side. So somebody has to stay behind, and human Ben Grimm offers to do it. And Johnny agrees and then throws Ben back through the portal, and he locks the door from that side. And 1 billion or so of Annihilus' forces, these nasty creatures with claws and teeth, are coming after him. And there's this moment where Ben, as a human, is banging on the portal and can't break through. And he's changing into the thing as he's banging into it and can't break through. And they have a moment where they know Johnny's going to die. And he says, 1 billion to 1 odds? Sounds good. And he goes, flame on. And then he goes after them. And this is the death, the unexpected death of Johnny Storm. It is powerful and heroic and quite emotional. And the next issue is maybe one of my favorite issues of Marvel Comics ever. And it is the funeral of Johnny Storm, and it's told picture by picture with no words. So the door closes, and Ben, as the thing, is hugging the children, and they're mourning. And then the Avengers show up, ready to fight, and there's no one to fight. And they just kind of, their shoulders drop, and the tears start flowing from them. And they're having the funeral, and Ben is just sitting there feeling like a failure for not being able to save his best friend, who, kind of like a brother, they always bicker, they always fight, they're always on each other, they're always playing pranks, especially Johnny to Ben. But you see here, like, it's more of a brotherhood than it is anything personal. And so the whole time, everybody's kind of moving and doing, and Ben's just sitting there. And there's this enormously powerful picture of Sue Storm. I don't think I included it for you. I'll have to send it to you later. There's a picture of Sue Storm, and she has a shield around herself, and she is just uncontrollably crying. And around it is Reed Richards' fingers stretched all over to try and find a hole so he can touch and comfort her. And she's refusing to be touched by anybody. She's just sitting there mourning for him. And so the Thing goes out to the desert with Thor and Hulk, and they are just fighting and breaking mountains and crushing each other. And there's this really powerful scene where the Thing is just punching Hulk, and Hulk's not moving, and his fists keep pounding, and then turns into hugging and crying together. And then that little picture of Thor crying as well. So he had to get out of this anger and rage and energy, and he went to two people that he couldn't hurt in a place that nobody would be hurt, and they just get out of their anger and aggression. And the issue ends, the issue ends with Franklin, whose favorite superhero is Spider-Man. And Spider-Man comes to talk to him and hang out, and they grab a hot dog. And Spider-Man doesn't have enough money for hot dogs, so he has to borrow money from Franklin. And they're talking about losing their best friend. So for Franklin, it's his uncle, and for Spider-Man, it is one of his best friends, Johnny Storm. And then Spider-Man says, I don't know if anybody's told you this, but I lost my uncle too. I'm getting emotional already. He's like, I lost my uncle too. And then Franklin says, you know what? I feel terrible because I think I could have saved my Uncle Johnny because I have all his power and I don't know how to use it. And Spider-Man says, well, I know I could have saved my Uncle Ben. And he talks about how he failed to save him and how it's his responsibility to do so, but his immature young self didn't think it was important to stop the robbery. And then, man, they fly off, and as you can see in the picture, it has, in the clouds, Johnny Storm and Uncle Ben. It says the uncles. What do you think?
Powerful. Very powerful. Yeah. That's Spider-Man's whole reason, you know. It's generational, too. So, you know, he's looking at kind of the next generation of somebody losing somebody, you know, like he's already experienced the loss. So he's, you know, of course he experienced the loss of the friend of the Human Torch, but, you know, as Ben obviously was his kind of basis for his morality throughout his career as a superhero, Spider-Man. So he's kind of consoling and, you know, saying that, you know, you lost somebody, but, you know, you can channel that, I guess, for good. Or, you know, like, you could be like me, you know, I've lost somebody, and, you know, I've turned out okay. I'm a spider, but, you know, no. But, no, it's really powerful and very, very insightful to loss and kind of generational, because we're all going to experience it somehow. And it's kind of like what you do with it, I guess. At least that's what I'm getting out of it.
Yeah. And the powerful connection. It's like you know, you can tell people you don't know what this feels like, and then you have somebody that knows exactly what it feels like. Spoiler alert for Into the Spider-Verse. Have you seen that?
Into the Spider-Verse. I haven't seen that. No, I've heard it's really good.
It's extremely, but small spoiler. Miles' uncle also dies, and he tells the other Spider-Men and Spider-Women, "You don't know how this feels," and they're like, "If anybody knows, it's us." And they've all their stories are rooted in the tragedy as well, of losing an uncle or somebody important to them as well. So there's just enormous power of like in the solidarity of knowing what it's like to lose somebody you love.
I got you. Quick question: When was this written? Has this been several years, or is this a newer comic?
I believe it's 2012 to 2015.
Okay.
And a lot more is happening here, but these are what I feel like are my favorite parts and highlights. It gets into characters that I've never heard of and storylines that, yeah, I kind of get.
Yeah.
um, but all sandwiched inside some truly amazing storytelling. And 2012, I think 2015. And for people who don't know, like Fantastic Four has run consistently from the 60s, I think.
Oh yeah.
And different writers will take that on. So started out with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and then somebody else took the mantle. And so you'll have a writer doing their own run, and you can kind of, if you don't want to read all 800 issues of like Spider-Man or something, you can read Dan Slott's run, which you can find out the issue numbers and read them. And that'll be its own encapsulated story. So Jonathan Hickman get his chance to write a Fantastic Four story, which many other people have done in the past. But this is him taking all of their lore and creating his own story, what he wants to tell with the Fantastic Four. And you see that with all sorts of writers, all sorts of characters. That's usually how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I've seen something before. You probably look it up on the Googles, but there's a thing where the villains are kind of rated in the Marvel universe. You're talking about kind of lesser known villains, like the ones that are really super immortal. They don't really show up that much, like the immortal, really powerful ones. Galactus being one of them, but he's not like the most powerful. And that blew my mind when I saw this. It's like a chart or something. Like you can literally just Google, Marvel most terrible, most powerful villains or whatever, and it's some kind of graph or chart that shows you the powers and who is actually the most powerful villains. And like you're saying, like some of them are just like maybe one-offs, or you don't really see them a lot. So there's a lot of lore, like you're saying, that the movies are just, not even touching the depth of the stories that actually are presented in these series of comics and writings. And, I would encourage, if there's anybody listening out there who is a Marvel fan or the movies, go more in depth with the stories, because they're, the movies are good, whatever. But again, like we were talking about earlier, it's just, they're not doing, in 2 hours, you can't do the justice of the storytelling of decades. So, definitely, check that out. As far as, this issue, where are we at now here?
Johnny Storm has died, and like all Marvel and superhero DC stuff, he doesn't stay dead, of course. And I kind of like how they bring him back to where Annihilus, whose army killed him, Annihilus uses the worms that he has in his power to bring him back to life so that he can kill him again. And then they bring him back to life so that he can kill him again. And there's just this long torture for him to try to convince him to let Annihilus into Reed's world, the 601 universe, to take it over. And so he puts him into a gladiator situation where he has these impossible odds that he has to fight. And him and the other prisoners have to fight to live, and they all die, and he resurrects them and kills them again. There is the scene when he finally gets out, and the other three don't know that he's alive. And they're in a battle, and they're losing. And Johnny flies up in the sky, and he writes the iconic 4 in flame above them. And then knowing that there's only one person that could or would do that, they're all like energized to fight again. And then in the cheesiest moment, Ben begins crying and goes, "It's Glover, it's Ive," and then just starts wailing down on some enemy. So he doesn't stay dead, of course. He comes back in a pretty powerful way. So Reed is dealing with the loss of Johnny Storm. He's dealing with the possible attack by Annihilus to come into his world. There are, what I didn't go over, there are 4 armies about to go to war. the Kree Empire is about to invade. There's the Council of Reeds that have brought the Mad Celestials to Earth and who are trying to use Earth technology to banish them. And the Council of Reeds is also trying to sabotage R. Reed Richards for not joining them. So he's dealing with this insurmountable amount of problems that one on any given day or any given timeline for him would be challenging. And so by the end of all of these problems, he's just exhausted and spent, and there's still the Mad Celestials coming after him. And so this is kind of the end game of the story. But Reed, Susan, Ben, Johnny, Valerie, Franklin are not prepared for the Mad Celestials. And so the council has utilized this weapon called the Soul's Hammer, this celestial killing weapon that's on Earth, and they fire it once at the Mad Celestials and wound one of them, but it's not enough to kill them. They don't have enough time to recharge. And so the Celestials begin to fire all on the Fantastic Four and the family. And Sue Storm creates her most powerful shield. So she is one of the handful of heroes powerful enough to create a force field that can block the blow of a Celestial. And as she's doing that, she's remembering what Valeria told her. She says, and so as all this explosion and fire and energy is going on, she's reminded of Valeria's words. The days are going to be dark and full of loss, and it'll feel like everything is going to break apart. That'll shatter and everything will end. Only you can hold us together. Can you be strong, Mother? Stronger than you ever been before. There'll be a moment when you're wanting to give up, and you're going to want to let go. And when you reach that point, look into the sky and remember the price that was paid. And as she says that, or as she remembers that, she looks in the sky, it's turning white. And the issue ends with adult Valeria and adult Franklin Richards coming down from the sky. And so once Franklin gets there, he banishes the Celestials, it says, into the center of a gas giant. And he says it'll only confuse him for a while, but it has enough time for us to talk. And he walks up to Franklin, his younger self. And in the universe that they hung out together, in the baby universe, he's been telling him, when this starts to happen, you're not allowed to use your powers. I want you to store them. And then he asks for the power back from him. And so both of their eyes turn blue, and he sucks this ball of energy out from his younger self and hands it over to his older self, and he's holding all the power of young Franklin Richards. And so Nathaniel is there as well, and he has, as he's saying this, you're watching all what's happening. But this is outstanding. He tells Reed, I've seen hundreds of iterations of this day. I've relived it countless times. I've interceded. I've manipulated. I've done everything I could to produce a new outcome. And my efforts failed every time. You see, son, this was the day that all of your sins caught up to you. It's the day you died. But Franklin figured it out. And he wouldn't have. He wouldn't stand for it. Every boy deserves a father. You always walk through the bridge. You always meet the council. You always meet those yous. With them, you always build suns and save universes. And with them, you always wake the mad space gods, and they will always destroy the council. I always helplessly watch, as even though you walked away, you always have paid a price for it. I watch, and there's nothing I can do. But that's how it is for any parent, isn't it? You do everything you can. You do your best. Then one day you're finished, and your children have simply become who they're going to be. And then in the background, you see adult Franklin. He whispers, rise. And then Nathaniel continues, this is who your son will be. This is who he is. And then he says, rise. And throughout all of space and time, the devourer of worlds has many heralds. And Franklin says, "Rise!" And Franklin has only one. And then Franklin says, "Rise to be my Galactus." And so he throws the energy into the dead Galactus that was in the Earth, and it resurrects Galactus to be the herald of Franklin Richards. And then Nathaniel says, all of this came from joining the council, being part of those Reeds trying to make the better worlds. He left them because he refused to sacrifice each of them. He refused to abandon those he loved for the greater cause. And they put the well-being of the multiverse ahead of the few, their family. It was a logical, rational choice, but the wrong one. The council built suns and saved universes. They constructed great machines for the good works. But because of their choice, there was one thing they were not capable of. There was one thing Reed could do that he could create that they could not. Look up at the life that you made. Look at the one who had sacrificed himself so that all might live. Whoa. You get that?
He made his own choice. Basically, he made his own universe.
Reed chose to walk away from the council so he could spend time with his family.
Oh.
And Reed chose to love his son more than he loved saving everything. And so Reed made something the council couldn't make. He made a Franklin Richards that loved him.
Oh, wow.
Remember, all other Reed Richards have a Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
But only one Franklin loved his dad so much that he would come back in time to save him. Because this is the day that all Reed Richards die. Is the day they fight the Mad Titan.
Mm.
And so every other Reed Richards chose to solve the problem of everything. But our Reed Richards chose to love his son.
Wow.
Remember the all other Nathaniel Richards were killed. There's only one Nathaniel Richards left. And there's only one Nathaniel Richards who told his son, Reed Richards, that every boy deserves his father.
It's definitely amazing. Powerful storytelling there. That's really cool. And it's so intricate.
Okay. Yeah.
It's so.
I'm not much of a crier. It's like years between I cry. And I finished this story, and I realized that it was about Franklin and how much his dad loved him and made him into the man he was. And I cried so much.
That's great.
And this is kind of what I really wanted to talk about, is that when I read that about a year and a half ago, like, I was probably at the worst when it came to depression. Like, life didn't go the way I wanted it to. Stress was more than I wanted to handle. And so I found myself laying on my couch playing on my phone while my kids ran around. And I would sleep in, and then 2 o'clock would hit on a Saturday, and I'd just go back to sleep. And reading this and a couple other things in life made me realize, like, maybe my kids deserve more than the dad who just lays on the couch, you know? And my responsibility, number one, even though life doesn't go the way I want or it screwed me over, whatever, my responsibility is for my kids to have a healthy dad. And so that's when I got more serious about depression and counseling and mental health.
Appreciate you sharing that, Chris. Yeah, it's definitely one of those things I do believe that our generation struggles with, is kind of identity and purpose, What's it all mean? You know, why are we here? And just depression in general, like the you know the stresses of life that we have that we're facing. You know, I definitely struggle myself. You know, of course, I'm not trying to put myself on any level. You know, everybody has their different struggles and things that they have, but you know, it's every day is a fight. You know, if you know, am I gonna be productive today? Am I gonna do something with my life? You know, instead of just playing games on my phone, like you said, or you know, and it really is deeper with mental health. You know, there can be really ingrained issues that we need to work out. You know, we need somebody to talk to, and all that kind of thing, and maybe even you know drugs at some point. You know, like they help. You know, and in my parents' generation, our parents' generation, it was more taboo. Like it was like you know, ooh, you're depressed. What's that mean? You know, like get off your ass and do something. You know, it wasn't like a it wasn't how we talk about it now. You know, like back then it was just ooh, you know, it's not a thing. And to be real with it, my mom struggled with she had a really like paranoid schizophrenia, basically. So growing up, kind of with that, you know, stigma and you know, just the mental health thing is just like, well, what do you mean she's crazy? You know, like everybody thinks it's like not a disease, but it's like something you can help. And sometimes with depression, you know, you can't help it. Like it's there's no helping it aside from therapy and prescription drugs, you know, or whatever that can ease whatever that ailment is. So, you know, depression, mental illness, and you know, it is a big thing that we need to talk more about for sure. You know, and it is something that can be helped a lot of the time just by getting out of your head and having somebody to talk to, getting outdoors maybe, because our generation too, we're just so in technology and you know plugged in but not, and you know, it's not to go on my old man rant, but you know, it's like that, you know, like we don't really connect as much as we used to back in the day. Like it's more not really artificial, but you know, it's less personal type stuff. But I definitely applaud you, man. You know, getting you know any type of help or talking or you know trying to do that, because you know for me too it's the same way. Another reason I do my podcast, like it really is another reason. It's a secret kind of compartment reason that I don't talk about a lot, but it is to really get out of my head and create my thoughts, and you know even talk to you. You know, so like I haven't you know talked to you in a few years, so it's a outlet kind of for being social as well. So it does help.
Yeah, fate has not smiled upon us that we get to live in the same city. I wish that were the case. I would love to hang out some more, but if it's a podcast that we have to do together to spend time, I'm all for it.
Oh yeah, we definitely will, man. And you know, the Fantastic Four was fantastic. That's an excellent story. You know, I appreciate you sharing. And I'm gonna post this somewhere online, so maybe people can follow along with this. I am trying to stay away from copyright infringement, so I don't know how that ties in. But
you know, I don't know how that works either. But most of these pictures I got for you were on other people's websites.
Yeah,
I don't know, but you're probably at the most going to get a cease to desist, not a lawsuit against you for posting that. And I don't think, like, I love this so much. Let's talk about mental health. I talk about Fantastic Four, and Marvel's not going to go shut this down. That's not what we're about. I think you'll be okay.
Disney has enough money now, right?
Yeah.
Disney has enough money, and they're definitely not going to get much if they try to sue me. So I'll just take it down.
You get all the profit you get from this episode, which is.
I don't want like guys and goons in suits with Mickey Mouse hats at my door.
Yeah, exactly. So for Fantastic Four, that I've never really cared about, it became like the greatest run I've ever read, and like it literally did change. Allowed me to have the conversations I needed to be in a headspace that my kids deserve. So, hope you enjoyed it, man. Hope it fit that your listeners' ears and everything.
Yeah. I was really disappointed that Marvel was in the battle with Fox for the Fantastic Four rights. So they weren't able to be a part of the movies, like the Infinity Gauntlet series, which they were originally in the comics. So, I was really kind of saddened to know that they wouldn't be a part of that whole story arc, which I think they played a very important role, if I'm not mistaken, in the actual comic series Infinity Gauntlet and Infinite Crisis. But yeah, Chris, man, I appreciate it. And if you ever need anything, give me a call, talk to me, shoot me a message, and we'll definitely get together. We'll have another one of these. I do want to have kind of regular guests, so,